The community chatter around Thrustmaster SOL-Rs doesn't seem to have a consensus. I've heard everything from these are the next big thing and the EVOs are dead, or people shouting that they're just overpriced T16,000s. I enjoyed my time using the T16s for 2 years before eventually upgrading to the VKB Gladiator NXTs, and only recently is my main stick now the VKB Gunfighters. I've been hands-on with the SOL-R2 for about 2 weeks now, and I can confidently say VKBs are not dead, and the SOL-Rs are not just overpriced T16,000s. Thrustmaster is offering something different in the mid-range market, and it's not about what's better, but who these sticks are for. I started out writing this script as a simple review, but I decided that I would also add an in-depth comparison section and even a little teardown. Sorry for the length, there's just a lot to consider when purchasing a mid-range stick in the market right now. Just a quick heads up, Thrustmaster did send me these sticks for free in exchange for a review or gameplay video. This is not a sponsored video. They have no say in this content or my opinions. They are my own. I have Amazon affiliate links below. It might be useful to have that open on the second screen while watching, so click it. I just told you that because I like Bezos money. If you want to learn more about how I handle brand relationships, I've got a brand policy link below. It outlines my goals, monetization, current affiliations, and how I try to protect consumers from shady anti-consumer companies. Also, check out my VKB NXT EVO review if you're comparing options. I highly recommend watching that as well before making the decision. Links in the description. All right, rapid fire. There's timestamps below, but if you're looking to buy these, I wouldn't skip. There's a monthly giveaway. You might want to check it out. Ask me questions live on Twitch. Subscribe. I'll be doing an unboxing and review of these from VKB next, so stay tuned. Also, I do plan on adding these joysticks to my list of joysticks that I do bindings for, so stay tuned to my website for that. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the Thrustmaster SOL-R2s, and we're starting right now. All right, let's get right into it and start going over the grip design. The SOL-R2 grip is ambidextrous, so it can be converted from left to right-handed operation. You could do this by removing this Phillips head screw. Once removed, the thumb rest and grip pad can be taken off and replaced with the opposite-handed grip and thumb rest. 2 more screws can be removed to release the hand rest. It can then be swapped around for opposite hand use. The pinky button can be removed via a toolless design and placed on the opposite side. At the base of the grip, there's a palm rest. The sole also includes an additional palm rest extender. I felt like the outside hat was a bit out of reach for me, and the palm rest helped. However, it made using the scroll wheel a little bit too tight. I guess reaching for the hat isn't that big of a deal, so I'll keep it off for now. If you're curious if these are going to fit your hands, here are measurements of mine for your comparison. This ambidextrous design saves the manufacturer some cost in production and logistics. They hopefully will spend elsewhere at the cost of a little bit of ergonomics. At the base of the grip, there is a lock for the twist axis. You simply use a 2mm Allen key to screw it far enough in to lock the Z-axis. Beneath this, there is a ring that is used to fasten the grip to the base. It seems to be made of aluminum, but I'm not totally sure. The threading inside definitely is. The grip is made entirely out of plastic, but it's very solid and it doesn't feel cheap or creaky like some of the entry-level sticks. Plastic is totally fine within this price point. The connector at the base resembles that old PS2 connector from keyboards back in the day. Connecting it to the base is as simple as firmly pressing in the connector and then screwing down the threading ring. The design makes it pretty hard to do this incorrectly if done in that order. However, if you don't firmly seat the connection first, I think you could damage it when you screw the ring in. This connector is compatible with Thrustmaster's ecosystem, so it supports the Warthog, Viper, and Hornet grips if you prefer those for flight sims. I tried to use Flycon's Evo grip, aka the Referral clone, on this base, but I wasn't able to get it to register the buttons. I'm not sure if the actual Connies would work since Referral apparently hates me, but this isn't an issue since I'm not sure why you would want to put a Porsche steering wheel on a Honda anyway. Overall, the grip design is decent and it fits the price range. My only issue is the reach for that outside hat. I should note that this probably wouldn't even be an issue for me if I didn't just come from sticks with a unilateral design, which I prefer. Let's review the buttons and hats from top to bottom. Depending on if the grip is on the base configured as left or right, the outside hat will be the 8-way hat with center push, and the inside will be a 4-way hat that actually will register as 4 buttons with center push. This is important to know because when you go to bind your buttons in game, pressing left on the outside hat will not be button 41 like you'd expect. All right, I'm going to go over the software portion of this later on in the video. However, I just want to interject here and correct myself because I didn't know this. I got the software after writing the script for this video. But by default, you have point of view hat switch checked, which means that this will actually be a hat. But if you deselect it, it actually does become those buttons. So they did give us an option to bypass that issue in the settings. And that's really all I want to say here. I'll get back to the software in a later part of the video. In the middle, there's an analog hat. This is actually registered as axis 4 and 5 and is not capable of being used as buttons without a lot of time delving into third-party software. This can be bound to any bind in-game that uses an axis like strafing, free look, speed limiter, binding throttle, etc. Unfortunately, not a bind like targeting, which is what I would have preferred in a perfect world. The 2 buttons below the hats are very simple. Buttons labeled 35 and 39. Below this is a scroll wheel. Scrolling up or down presses a button once per every tick, and pressing in presses a button as well. There is no function for pushing the wheel to the left or right. Also, inside the software, you can change this to be a virtual axis rather than buttons if you prefer. The final button is your pinky button. Again, it's pretty straightforward. The box does come with a second option for this button so that you can go with whatever you feel comfortable with. Unfortunately, if you add both pinky buttons at the same time, they both register as button 28. This is no deal breaker here, just wishful thinking. However, I may actually keep both of them on to guarantee a press. And finally, the SOL-R grip has 2 triggers. The main trigger presses button 24 initially, and once held in all the way, it presses both buttons 24 and 25. So make sure that those 2 binds don't conflict because there's no way to only press button 25. I would really like to see this be configurable in the software. The second trigger is simply button 26 when it's pulled in, button 27 when it's pushed up. The grip does not use potentiometers like the previous T16000M, and it feels great. Feels no different than what I'm used to with VKB. It can be hard to describe how buttons, hats, and triggers feel using just words and images. The best way I've found is to let you hear them alongside my quick description. So I would grab your headphones. Let's start with the hats. Both the 8-way and 4-way hats have a satisfying click and feel, but I often trigger the center push by accident. So avoid binding anything disruptive like power toggle or exit seat to the center push. The analog mini stick has a nice rubber texture, though it can feel a bit cramped at times. The top buttons are solid, no complaints here. The scroll wheel has a firm rubber grip, good tactile steps, and a satisfying press. Unfortunately, the rapid fire trigger is underwhelming, almost no sound and very little tactile feedback. The main trigger, on the other hand, feels just right for this price point. The pinky button is perfectly fine, no complaints here. The thumb rest is actually plastic, unlike the other panels on this part of the grip. They're rubber. No issues with that, but I will note that the SOL-R does come with a thumb rest delete panel if you don't want it. The grip does not use potentiometers like the previous T16000M, and it feels great. Feels no different than what I'm used to with VKB. That covers the grip. Now let's take a look at the base. The base of the SOL-R joystick is completely identical regardless on if it's the left hand or the right hand. You simply specify what you want to use by toggling the switch beneath the base. In fact, they're both labeled SOL-R1. Now, I initially thought the base plate was aluminum, but it's actually plastic, with these steel plates fastened to it on the inside. This helps by adding weight to reduce wobble if the sticks are not mounted, and it works pretty well. Speaking of mounts, the mounting holes match the entry-level T16000, so if you are upgrading, there's no need to purchase or modify new mounting plates. While writing the script, I noticed a third thread hole. What do you think this is? Is it just for more security, or will this be used to connect to an unreleased add-on like a button box or something like that? Or do you think it might be something else entirely? Let me know what you think in the comments below. The rubber pads are great and do a good job of preventing the sticks from sliding around. If that wasn't already good enough, the SOL-R comes with these additional feet that you can attach. This includes rubber pads, and it widens the base even further. Although I will say this makes the footprint massive, so this config may not work well for every desk. Alright, with that out of the way, let's flip the base back over and go over the features here. The button layout here is almost symmetrical, with the exception being the encoder dial and knob. The dial presses buttons 9 and 10 respectively, once per step, and button 11 when you press it in. The knob, on the other hand, continuously presses down buttons 20 through 23 depending on where it sits, and it does not have a push-in function. On each side of the base at the top, there are two switches. Pushing these up or down simply presses buttons. The buttons beneath these are unique push buttons with customizable backlighting. I absolutely love these buttons. I will discuss these further when I get into the feeling and sound portion next. Lastly, on the base there is a throttle. It is bound as an axis and simply gives 100% while it's all the way down, and negative 100% when it's pushed all the way up. Also, the LED lights actually follow. The first light activates at approximately 50%, the second at 0, the third at negative 50, and the fourth relatively close to 100. I think this is nice. Unfortunately, there is no physical detent. The 01 and 02 numbers are backlit and informs you if the sticks are configured for left or right hand use. 01 for the right hand and 02 for the left hand. I have to say how much this triggers me. We read from left to right. Wouldn't the left stick be first? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Anyway, lastly, there is an LED backlit logo that has a polished reflective finish. And of course, the colors are customizable via the software. All right, time to put those headphones back in. Let's talk about the feel of the base buttons. The switches at the top have a very satisfying tactile feel and sound. The push buttons below this are, well, let me just show you my first impressions. I like this switch. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. These are by far the best feeling buttons you'll ever find on a joystick base. They have a firm yet soft rubber feel, and even have a slight audible click. If you've ever owned or used a Go XLR, the feel is so similar that I had to check to see if Thrustmaster's parent company owns TC Helicon. If you're unaware, the Go XLR is so over-engineered that even with worldwide popularity, TC Helicon no longer makes them. I found out from the Noob Provider's review that Thrustmaster's parent company also makes high-end digital audio and DJ equipment. This explains why these buttons are S tier, while the rest are about A or B tier. Enough about those. The left dial has a decent feel when turning, and the push-in is excellent. The knob on the right is also satisfying with a nice tactile and audible feedback. Lastly, the throttle is okay. I felt better, but this is far and away from the entry-level T16000Ms. I would have liked to have seen a detent here if possible. Maybe have something you could replace on the inside to add or remove it if you want it or not. Maybe someone in the community will step up and create something that they made on their 3D printer and sell it on Etsy for the tinkerers, you know? I also like how wide and shallow the base is. It helps with stability and saving space vertically. All right, taking a look here in editing and seeing these side by side, you can see that the base is a lot more narrow. However, the grip itself is really tall, and I think they needed to do that in order to get this stick to be compatible with their existing Warthog line, and also for those people who have bigger hands that have been complaining about like VKB and Virpil sticks, you might actually have a more comfortable feel here with these. So it could be for the better. However, it does save space as far as the base's size is concerned, but overall it's still higher than the other sticks that I'm comparing it to. All right, time to get to the gimbal. This is going to be a point of contention. I will try to be as objective here as I can in the beginning, but I'll have to give my opinions later, but I'll also include my biases. It's best to show you how the ball and socket gimbal works on the Warthog because it's more visible. Now, I don't own this base, so I'll have to borrow some footage from the Noobifier. Thanks, Noob. Be sure to check out his review for a second perspective on these as well. As you can see, applying pressure in any direction applies an even tension to the spring. This has many advantages and disadvantages that I'll get to more when we cover the comparison portion of this review. But essentially, it's cost-effective, compact, and most importantly, the design ensures that the tension is distributed evenly regardless of what direction you're moving the stick in, even diagonally. The alternatives are typically the cam and spring or the pincer designs. If you don't know what cams are, they affect the axis curve. Almost kind of similar to what you can kind of manipulate in software or in game, but it's just on the physical side. Higher end bases typically come with multiple to customize the feel. They range from having a deep detent to as smooth as you can get with the cam. The springs, on the other hand, are there to provide resistance and again, often come with multiple weights for the user to swap in order to customize the feel. This cam and spring, as well as the pincer designs, has its disadvantages as well. The main one to mention is the uneven tension that you get. I find it hard to express this in words, so I'll just show you this graphic. This is pretty objective to say that this design has the smoothest experience when swinging to and from the x-axis. I'll get to my opinions on this more in the comparison section of the review. As far as the ball and this threading, at the time of this recording, I still can't tell if this is made from aluminum or some kind of high-end plastic. It kind of feels cold to the touch, but I think my mind is playing tricks on me. Regardless, this isn't toy quality, and I'm kind of impressed. All right, now that I've hyped you up on that, let me bring it back down. This is great, but this also comes with some disadvantages. The most common dislike is the feeling that you get around the center. Whenever you go over where the X and Y intersections meet, the stick almost falls into a detent. This is not great for when you want to make fine adjustments. I should note that if you're coming from the T16000s, you've been dealing with this downside to this design all along. And I can say that the issue is a lot less apparent on these versus the T16s. I think this design is proprietary and trademarked by Thrustmaster. It is only used in their entry-level T16000s and the Warthog base to my knowledge. Competitors either use cam and spring or some slight deviation from that. And get this, even Thrustmaster recently released a new high-end base called the EVO, and it incorporates the cam and spring design as well. I think I prefer the fact that this model comes with the ball and socket gimbal. My main reasons for this opinion is the alternative to the status quo, even tension while aiming, simplicity, and a compact design. I believe the intended audience for the SOL-R will likely prefer the feel of this over the competition. And the most important thing I'm not sure I can express enough, I think the commenters and the Redditors and even my own preconceived thoughts were that since this uses the same technology as the entry-level T16000Ms, that it's more of the same. I'm here to tell you, this is leaps and bounds better than that. Now, when you factor in the customization options that you get with the direct competitor to these, it's going to come down to personal opinion. I'll cover that more in my comparison. Even though the SOL-Rs are not marketed towards the tinkerers, self-repairs, and customizers, I still want to tear this thing down so I can see what it looks like inside. Let's start with the grip. Flipping it over to the left side, there are 4 main screws, including the one that removes the palm rest. There are 4 screws on the right side of the grip that need to be removed. Plus a 5th screw that holds in the thumb rest. And finally, a 6th one underneath that keeps the grip together. With those out of the way, the left side of the grip easily comes right off. Now that this is open and I'm looking inside, I must say that this is much better than what I would have expected from Thrustmaster. This is on par, if not better in some cases, than VKB. Editor Subliminal will try to throw up some comparison shots. This is about as far as I'm willing to tear down the grip due to the fear of me not being able to get it back together perfectly. I have to say that tearing this down did not seem destructive at all. Almost seems like it was designed that way, although I don't think it was. All right, now let's get to the base. The base of the SOL-R has 12 total screws that keep it connected to the rest of the body. 8 on the outside edge, and 4 on the inside. Once those are off, the base is detached. Now, at this point, in order to remove the gimbal, I thought that these 4 screws would suffice. That's not the case. On the top, there are 4 torque screws that need to be removed first. It was at this moment that I started to suspect that Thrustmaster has no intention of making these easily serviceable or tweakable. This Torx bit is not going to be lying around in everyone's drawer. I like to tinker, so I've got my little iFixit kit. If you do like to tinker, it's not a terribly complicated teardown by any means. It's just clear it wasn't designed as a priority. Once you get those out, the screws in the base can be removed and the gimbal comes out. All right, so there's the gimbal. What I would have liked to have seen here is an easy way to access the spring, so maybe I could swap it or add a spacer to maybe give it more tension. All right, honestly, I've seen enough here. I don't really need to go any further. If tweaking and customizing is a priority to you, then these sticks were never intended for you in the first place. All right, so I want to briefly go over the software for a minute here. So the best way to access it is to click the Windows button and type in USB game controllers. This will bring up this dialog box here. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. And actually the way you get to the software is just double clicking the joystick in this menu, which is a bit odd. So it's not like it's in a program installed really on the computer. You just download the drivers from their website. And then when you click this, instead of the Windows dialog opening up, this pops up. And it's very simple. You have indicators here anytime any of these buttons are pressed. You have your axes, and then you have a couple of options down here. Now by default, this point of view hat switch is on. So what that means is the outside hat is going to become a 8-way hat. It's actually a hat in joystick software terms. Now, if you uncheck this box, which I would recommend doing, then instead of it being a hat, it will be just buttons, which I think makes more sense when it comes to when you're setting up your binds, because then you'll know that the buttons on this hat are buttons 30 through 34, rather than it being button 30 when it's pressed in and then, you know, hat left, right, up, down when it's not. I'd rather have the buttons. I think it makes it more simple that way. So yep, you have your buttons there, so you'd uncheck that, and then the next options that you have are your encoders here. You can actually change these encoders to be axes instead. Now, I'm not showing the stick itself here, but I am scrolling as fast as I can on the scroll wheel on the stick, and you're seeing how fast that's going up. Doing it as fast as I can. In my opinion, that's like too slow. And I'm gonna do the same thing here to the encoder knob at the bottom. That's a little bit faster there. But I feel like this is too slow for me to like use this for mining, which I would anticipate a lot of people will try and do. It just doesn't go up fast enough. But regardless, I think honestly, you'd probably be better off just using them as buttons. So you just want to turn those off. Basically just uncheck everything. That's my recommendation. And I didn't show off here. You can, you know, look at your axes as they happen here. Very simple stuff. And then the last thing that it has is at the end here, you can change the LED colors. So you can go through and pick the color you want and per each one individually, or you can select them all and change the color that way, just like that. And then boom, they're all changed color. I can change them all to red, and it changes it, you know, in real time. And then you just click OK, and then it'll apply that. You want to make sure you hit OK after that, or else it will, it won't save your changes. So yeah, I mean, that's it. Very simple software. Of course, I would like to see more, but I think it's really all people need. But yeah, for sure, I would like to see more stuff in here. I hope they add more stuff in the future. One important thing that I see that is missing is I don't have a way to calibrate any of these axes. So if they start to deviate at some point, I don't have to calibrate them. Now these are used, they don't use potentiometers, they use their Hall effect sensors. So you probably won't need to do that. However, I would definitely like to see that ability to do, just in case something happens, you know, later on down the road when the stick is years old. But I'm sure that's something that they can add later. Anyway, that's it for the software. All right, we're almost to the comparison portion, but first I got some disclaimers and some of the methodology I'm gonna be using here. Up to this point, I've remained as unbiased as I could while providing as much relevant info as I can. But since I'm comparing now, some opinions are going to be unavoidable, but I'll still try to stay as objective as I can. Furthermore, this video is being released in the middle of a trade war. I'm going to talk about and show prices on screen that are almost certainly going to change. If you're in Europe, which I know some of you are, there is actually a significant price difference in some cases. No matter where you are from, I encourage you to actually add these items to your cart and get a shipping cost before you really compare prices. For these comparisons, I will be using the current US prices. Now for the viewers that may not be aware of what is available in the market, I'll briefly describe the sticks that I'll be comparing. First up, Thrustmaster's own T16000Ms, since I know many of you are looking to upgrade from those. In case you're considering something higher end, I will be comparing these to my main sticks, the VKB Gunfighter Mark IVs with the Cosmo SEMA grip, also known as the Space Combat Grip, or SCG. I may also briefly bring up Flycon's Evo Mark I, also known as the Referral clone, since they're the closest thing I have to an actual Referral product. If someone from Referral is watching, please send me a review sample or something. I hate having to bring up this product that is a blatant knockoff every time I'm asked to compare. Most of my comparisons will be between the SOL-Rs and the VKB Gladiator NXT EVOs, since this is the direct competitor. I'm aware of Turtle Beach's Velocity 1 flight stick and Wing's Ursa Minor. Unfortunately, neither of these brands have reached out to me to provide a review sample, and I can't afford to buy them. From what I can tell, the Turtle Beaches look like and straight up claim to be designed with consoles in mind. The screen looks cool, I guess, and it seems to have similar sexy buttons on the base. But overall, it doesn't look like it aligns with my audience. The Wing brand, on the other hand, is more in line with what my viewers would be interested in. I've been following WinWing for years due to their flight sim hardware. It's really next level how you can essentially replicate cockpits from real life planes. I was excited to see them enter the market, but as soon as they did, I started hearing that the Ursa Minor was a ripoff of the VKB NXT EVO.
And even the mounting points were the same, which allowed us to fit the VKB gimbal into the WinWing base.
And the resemblance is uncanny. Okay, this whole thing with me trying to stay objective is gonna have to take a back seat for a second. The Ursas do appear to be priced lower with a perpetual discount, but is that due to a lack of R&D required to design their own unique product? I feel like I'd rather just have the real thing. VKB's customer service is unmatched, and the Gladiators have proven themselves in the market over the years. Anyway, if WinWing or Turtle Beach ever reach out, I'll be sure to do an honest, objective review and keep my opinions brief and safe to the end, and make my biases clear. Alright, let's start off by comparing the grip. We'll start with the T16000s. Man, it's a night and day difference. One of the most important things, you go from 8 buttons on the grip to 21. This is a game changer. Having to reach down to the base to hit buttons while in combat or in a chaotic situation is not ideal. All of the buttons and the trigger feel like toys by comparison. And don't even get me started on the legendary Z-axis drift issue that's plagued the T16000s for decades. I know many of you are going to be concerned with the Z-axis issue since the SOL-Rs resemble an upgraded T16000. I'm happy to tell you that Thrustmaster claims the X, Y, and Z axis all come with their heart or Hall effect accurate technology sensors. Some of you may not know, and I can't get into a TED talk about the science here, but you can Google it. Just know that this is by far way better than what is offered on the T16000s. And Nintendo is currently under fire for not offering these on their $500 Switch too. Alright, comparing the T16 grip to the SOL-R anymore would be just me listing all the features of the SOL-R. We already know about all that. When you start to compare mid-range grips, things start to get interesting. First off, VKB's Space Combat grip found on the Gladiator NXTs is literally the exact same grip from their flagship Space Combat sticks, the Gunfighter Mark IVs with the SCG grip. All that to say, VKB's Space Combat grip is ever so slightly better in almost every way. Every single button feels just a little bit better built, a little bit more satisfying to click. But don't get me wrong, the SOL-R grip is on par with the price range. Again, it's hard to describe how something feels, so here's a graphic to show you how I would rank the build quality of the SOL-R grip to the T16s and the VKBs. As far as ergonomics, the VKBs are slightly better due to the fact that they have that ambidextrous design, meaning the left grip is designed for the left hand, the right grip is designed for the right hand, with no compromises to make it ambidextrous. To be clear, the ergonomics is great on both, and I don't think it will weigh heavily on your decision. As far as the analog hat though, it's hard to say which one is better. The SOL-R mini stick seems to be more firm, maybe slightly better built. However, it doesn't have much travel, and I can see myself accidentally bumping the hats as I get used to this grip. On the other hand, the SCG has a little bit more travel, and more importantly, it can be toggled from an analog mini stick to an 8-way hat on the fly while in operation. For the 2 buttons on the top and the 1 pinky button on the bottom, the SOL-R is on par with the VKBs, but the SOL-Rs have 2 buttons. And the scroll wheel is simply non-existent on the SCG grip, but it does have a similar one on the base. The SCG grip does have hats that can be swapped for buttons. The 8-way analog can be swapped for a 4-way, and I think there's something else to be swapped too, I forget. Regardless, if you just buy the SCG Premium like 90% of people will, there really isn't a need to swap anything. Also, removing the grip from the SOL-Rs is so much better than with the VKB NXTs. You actually have to open the base of the NXTs and remove 3 screws to detach it. It's not designed to be swapped that often. That's typically a top tier feature. I would mention in the higher tier that although I love the SCG grip, I do covet the Virpil Connie Alpha grip. My Virpil clones have a metal flip trigger and a space brake. These feel orgasmic. The mini sticks feel like something you might see on a mid to high range Xbox controller. You know what? Let me stop before I make a mess. Considering a set will cost you $1,000 or more, they better be top tier. Up until now, anything negative I've said about the SOL-R grip or the SCG grip has been negligible, no deal breakers there. But this last thing could actually be a deal breaker for some of you guys. The T16 grip has 8 buttons, the SOL-R has 21, and the SCG Premium grip has 30 buttons on the grip alone. The main difference is the SCG Premium actually comes with a 4th hat on your thumb. And as I mentioned before, you can swap that analog hat from being a mini stick to also being an 8-way hat. Those extra 9 buttons per grip are huge. Now, Thrustmaster does make up for this for the tons of buttons that you have on the base. However, the more buttons on the grip, the less often you have to remove your hands from the stick to click a button. Someone actually commented on my unboxing video of these that you may as well just use the keyboard. Now, I don't agree with this 100%. They're ignoring the immersion factor and how much easier it is to find and click these buttons without looking through the whole alphabet. However, they kind of have a point. All right, while we're on the topic of the bass, let's compare to the same sticks. I start with the T16000s. I don't even know where to begin. They're barely weighed down. I enjoyed the T16000s for over 2 years before upgrading to the NXTs. I had my roll bound to twist on the right stick, and every few minutes the right stick would rotate on the desk until it was uncomfortable for me to twist inwards or outwards again. So I frequently had to pick it up, turn it back around, and set it back down. What the fuck? Even without the extra feet, you have to twist the base of the SOL-R pretty hard to get it to move. I'm not willing to twist it anymore. Same can be said for the NXTs. The base on the NXT is just solid steel, whereas the Thrustmasters, it's plastic with these steel weights on the inside. No big deal, all that matters is how much they slide on the desk, and they both are great. As far as the base buttons on the T16s, there's no backlighting. In fact, at night, the LEDs near the gimbal might even make seeing the stealth black buttons impossible. Oh, but don't worry, they have these little bumps to help you feel out what button you're on. Look, I don't have enough time to read Braille just to pull out my fucking landing gear. Alright, enough with beating up on the $70 stick. The buttons on the base of the SOL-R are individually backlit with customizable LEDs. I think I've talked about them enough earlier, but I'll say one more time, these are S tier. The buttons on the base of the NXT are literally few and far between. There are only a few, and the space between them makes it hard to hit the wrong one. Sucks that there are so few buttons, but at least I can see them with no backlight. SOL-Rs have 4 switches on each base, while the NXT EVOs has 1 per base, and it's not near as satisfying or functional. The NXTs and the Sols both have a dial. On the NXT, it's an encoder wheel, but they function the same. If I had to choose, I would go with what the Thrustmasters have. There's nothing on the NXTs that come close to the knob on the right side of the base. You would need to look at VKB's side extension module if you want something like this. Finally, the throttle. I like the position and ergonomics of the Thrustmaster throttle for sure, but I like how firm yet smooth the NXT throttle is. You can't go wrong either way, this is personal preference. At this time, there is no Omni throttle adapter for the SOL-Rs. This has been a pretty popular upgrade amongst NXT owners for their left stick. I really hope we see something from Thrustmaster on this soon. During my teardown, I saw some evidence that maybe Thrustmaster might allow expansion via some accessories, but this is just me speculating. However, we know VKB has an assortment of modules that you can attach directly to the base or standalone. I should note that some might argue that the SOL-Rs have enough buttons on the base and expansion isn't necessary. They're probably right. Overall, in my opinion, the Thrustmaster base takes the cake here hands down. The super higher end sticks don't even have buttons on the base. Technically, the grip just sits right on the gimbal. All the extra money you pay is for the all metal construction and the customization options. Within the VKB ecosystem, if you want more buttons, look at the side extension module, the throttle quadrant, or maybe even the Stex with the STG or Space Throttle add-on grip if you really ball. I'm going to be unboxing and reviewing that soon. Alright, now let's start comparing the gimbal. Now comparing the ball and socket gimbal to the NXT gimbal, it's a bit less black and white and it's subjective. I will just list off some of the benefits. Forgive me if I missed one. The NXTs come with 3 different interchangeable spring weights. For example, if you like, you could use a heavy spring on one axis and a softer spring on another. I like to do this for my left stick. It feels more like a throttle. The stick I aim with, I prefer to be more loose and free, so I use lower weights on both axes. If you want, you can simply remove the springs if you want. One example is no spring on the left stick's y-axis so that it doesn't return to center on its own, thus behaving more like a traditional throttle. I should note one downside to springs is that they can break. I actually had this happen to me while I was live streaming. But no joke, some of you may have been there. I was able to open up the base, replace the broken spring during a quantum jump from Port Alizar to Hurston, and I got the stick put back together and ready to go before I got there. And this is my first time interacting with the springs. Spring and cam bases come with lots of extra springs. At this point, they're almost a consumable. Note that this has only happened to me once within the 4 years that I've been using the NXTs. Another feature that helps with fine tuning is the dampeners on the NXTs. These add friction to the axes by simply rotating a screw on the desired axis. That no spring config that I talked about earlier works much better if the friction is firm. While turning this joystick into a throttle, why not install the X-axis lock plate and remove that axis altogether? I think you get the point. Check out my review of the NXTs if you want to know more. On the other hand, the SOL-R gimbal is not designed to be modified in any way. And with the NXTs, the modification is literally a feature. As for the Gunfighter Mark IVs, here's my first impression from my unboxing video.
Good. Oh, that's butter.
And customization is turned up to 1,000 on these, even higher than the NXTs. You almost need a physics degree to fully understand it. As I stated earlier, the ball and socket design has the advantage of having even resistance no matter what direction you're moving the sticks in. It's compact, less expensive, and has less moving parts, so in theory, it should be more reliable. The T16000 uses the same basic design, but it's just simply built for a $70 stick. The difference is night and day, and I'm sure the Warthog is night and day better than the Sols. You just get what you pay for. Alright, I think you get the point. We've now arrived to the portion of the video where I'm going to completely disregard objective facts and just give my opinions. Don't worry, I'll still share my biases. First off, in my opinion, there is no better stick between the Gladiator NXT with the Space Combat grip and the SOL-Rs. There is only the better stick for you. Please note, Thrustmaster has not made a toy here. This is a serious mid-range contender. People in the comments and on Reddit are going to tell you that the Thrustmasters are built like trash or toys. All they're doing is projecting their past experience with a 10-year-old $70 product onto this. Although I don't blame them, it does kind of look like a toy. Anyway, I'm telling you that the elites that have never laid their hands on this product claiming that the SOL-Rs are overpriced, poorly designed, and trash quality are entitled to their own wrong opinions. Overall, the quality is on par with the price in my opinion. Now that we've established that, my opinions are that the SCG grip from VKB is overall better. I want more buttons on the grip. The base buttons are cumbersome in my opinion. My issue with the button quality on the SOL-R grip is no big deal, but it's worth mentioning. The quality of the base buttons is better on the SOL-Rs and they're plentiful. No need to pay extra for a module. I don't believe the gimbal is going to disappoint either way from the perspective of the target audience. However, having zero customizability may be something you might regret down the road. VKB customer service is legendary when things break, but the simple ball and socket gimbal probably won't have any issues anytime soon. So will it even matter? My goal with this review hasn't been to tell you what you should or should not buy, but rather give you the info that you need to buy what is best for you. If I did that and you consider purchasing these, my affiliate links are down below. You know how those work. I receive some Bezos money at no cost to you. If you decide to go the VKB route, you can use code subliminal at checkout and save 5%. I don't get any form of compensation when you do this. No worries, just enjoy whatever sticks are best for you. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the SOL-R 2.6. Would you buy them over the VKB NXTs, or would you go with a different route altogether? Go ahead, Verbal Master Race, let me know how much better your sticks are than these and why they're worth 2 to 3 times the price. But let's be real, You didn't make it this far to the video, did you, Gary? All right, let me turn this thing off.